First of all, first cab off the rank, I'd like to introduce you all to Sarah Rowe, who is the product manager at HammerTech. Look, Sarah is a HammerTech veteran. She's been heading up the APAC region configuration, implementation, and success teams, and is now a key member of the product team. So formally, everyone, say hello, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Look, before we formally hand over and introduce some of the other guys, if you can just give us a little bit of a background of HammerTech for those that haven't come across you guys previously. I think that'd be a great insight for the attendees that we've got here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that haven't heard of HammerTech, it's a cloud-based system that allows construction companies to manage health, safety, environment, and quality processes. So as a business, we started in Melbourne in 2015 and now have clients in Australia, New Zealand, and the US. And many of the leading builders in Australia are our customers. And actually looking down the list, I can see a couple of That's good.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for providing that background for the attendees. Next person I'd like to introduce is Angus McIntyre, and he's the customer success manager at Payapps. So Angus is primarily responsible for looking after the ANZ client base and onboarding new customers, helping them to get the most out of their new software quickly and also efficiently. Last and definitely not least, and we're very excited about this, we've got Elinor Moshe. Now, Elinor has been featured in the Australian National Construction Review, Property Council of Australia's top 500 women in property. And then also too, on top of that, sorry, I also forgot to mention the top 100 women in construction. So as you can see, we've definitely got an industry expert with us here today, which we're really excited about. She's also the host of a popular podcast, Constructing You, which I'm sure maybe a number of you have heard one of her podcasts over the last few weeks and months. And she's also the founder of the successful platform, The Construction Coach, and which I'll get her to share with you shortly. She's also published her first book. So Elinor, congratulations about publishing your first book. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and when it's going to be released and when we can grab a copy of it?
Thank you very much for that introduction, Nick. I appreciate it. I am currently in the process of publishing my first book. It is a very exciting time and I cannot wait for the book to see the world. It is called Constructing Your Career, and I share the 12 foundational stages that are required to work on the greatest project you will ever get to work on. And that is, of course, you and your career. So it is full of not just motivation and feel-good advice, it is full of practical, actionable insights that will show you how to build an exceptional career in construction based on high-performance principles to sum up a 50,000 word manuscript in a sentence. So it's going to come out in the next couple of months, and I would love for you to connect with me on social media. You'll be of the first to know when that's happening.
Great. Thanks, Elinor. I'm sure you'll be getting the odd message here and there from people across the construction industry. So thank you for that. So look, what are we going to get out of today and why we're here essentially? So look, we've got, as you can see, we've got a panel of industry experts here with a number of years of experience, and what they're going to do is they're going to share some of the key things that we've seen that make for a successful software rollout. And importantly, the things you can do as a business or as an individual to ensure you get maximum value from whatever software you apply to your business. And when we were putting together, the idea for this webinar, it was really around the key elements that make up a successful software rollout and some of the key questions that maybe don't get asked as part of a software implementation. So we've brought all the experts together. We want you to listen to them. We want it to be engaging. We want it to be interactive. So formally, I'll hand it over to Sarah. Sarah, over to you, and then we'll go through each of the panelists one by one.
So yeah, I think one of the first things that everyone's been asking is what are some of the things to consider to prepare for implementing software. So it really is a great place to start, because if you get this right, then you're set up for a smooth implementation. Something that can often get overmissed is understanding your own processes. So before you go anywhere near a software vendor, understand how you are currently doing things. What are the pain points? What are you able to achieve that you want to achieve? Or sorry, what are you not able to achieve that you want to achieve? And also understand what is currently working well. With all this in mind, keep the idea that a needed requirement is very different than a nice to have requirement.
Yeah.
Also with your processes, does everybody know them currently and are they using them? A few times in implementation, we realized, site teams don't even use the current processes. So we're there to implement a new system, and for them, they're being shown new processes as well and new ways of doing things. So understanding this early on, it can be, rectified during the whole training process. It's an implementation process, but it's a really key thing that, you need to know upfront. Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Sarah. You keep going? No, it's fine.
No. Okay. Just a couple more things are, involve people that will be implementing the software, involve them right from the beginning. If they're not part of that process, they won't feel a sense of ownership, they won't have buy-in, and actually they're the people that are going to ask the real world questions. So these questions will come up in implementation, so understanding them super early on is only going to benefit everybody. And keep an open mind. So, you know your problems, but the vendors, they know the solutions. So you don't go in with, an end solution in mind. Go in with what your problems are, what you want it to achieve, but be open to how it could look, because it could actually be better than what you were expecting.
I think that that third point you made, Sarah, around getting people involved at the very beginning, having all those key internal stakeholders on board and involved at the very beginning is going to make that seamless transition and implementation into a software platform a lot easier. But also as part of that whole decision-making process in terms of, identifying the software platform that's being implemented and putting in the necessary steps to be able to implement it effectively. I think that's a very important point as part of that, as part of the beginning of the process, like you've outlined.
Yeah, I think there's been a few situations where, the people that are going to be responsible or tasked for implementing it have come into the process way too late. And then you're kind of starting the process a little bit again when they join. Whereas, there's different requirements of what you'd like it to be like, what it needs to achieve from a business perspective. And then there's the people that are actually going to be using it.
Yeah.
Is it user friendly? Are they going to get a lot out of it? Yes, the outcome may suit the business, but actually trying to input the data to get the outcome is not going to help anybody. So yeah.
Correct. And look, we've mentioned communication a few times already, and it's definitely a theme that runs through all this. I suppose, what are some of the essential things businesses need to get right before they even start rolling out a software? Before we even get to that point of implementing the software, what are the key things that they need to consider and some of the questions that they need to ask?
Yeah, definitely communication. So, the obvious ones of in communicating to everybody as well, internally, externally, absolutely everybody, what's being implemented, what this change is going to mean, why it's important, because everybody wants to know the why. How will the change occur? What support are they going to be getting? And really focusing on how will this affect you? But apart from this as well, you want to talk about what won't be changing. So, you've got your current processes and ways of doing things. These items will not be changing. These will be changing. So I feel that is as important as what will. We always recommend to implement on 2 to 3 projects first. There's going to be change throughout this. So you're going to start with processes. They'll change when you are evaluating your process against the system. They will change when you have the system configured, but they will change again once the system gets used out on site. So using those 2 to 3 projects, you can nut out a lot of that change and refinement that you're needing. And getting a variation of user types in those 2 to 3 projects as well. You know, someone that's not tech savvy, someone that is tech savvy, and then really understanding what are going to be the pain points. And a super obvious one, I guess, but it does get overlooked, is get everyone set up correctly. So check connection on site, check the age of laptops, check their devices. If you're implementing an online system that's meant to be used out on site in real time, give them the tools that then they can get the benefits from the system, not just use it. So, you know, you're investing all this time and money into a new system, so don't go to all that effort and then not allow the users to get the full benefits out of it.
And that's another good point, is having it set up from the beginning. So you're setting yourself up for success, not only short-term success, and long-term successful usage and uptake is the key. I think, you know, I dare say we've all come across potentially, you know, situations where the success hasn't been set up from the beginning, and then inevitably it's led to failure in some way, shape or form. So that initial part, like you've outlined, and having everything set up from the get-go is very crucial.
Yeah, there's been quite a few times, you know, we get to site for training and someone's using a laptop that is insanely old.
Yeah.
You know, it's super slow, and then they're being asked to do processes on site, like, you know, that are involving contractors, so like inductions. And they're being asked to do this on a super slow laptop that is absolutely just not going to help them in any way. So yes, it's getting those things set up and getting them right as well.
Yeah. Which then leads me now to a question for Elinor. And Elinor, I'm gonna run through a scenario with you if I can, and it's probably a scenario that a lot of the attendees on the webinar today might have come across in their time. So Elinor, I'm a commercial manager of a business, and we've made a purchase. We've made a software purchase where we're excited. Now I need to get everyone using it. I don't have a team of learning and development people behind me to be able to facilitate that software implementation. What do I do? How do I roll this out effectively?
Congratulations, first of all, you've made the right decision.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yep.
You're welcome. This is one of the most common scenarios that happened in the first company I worked for. They were going through a growth phase and they identified, okay, we need software, without actually doing what Sarah just suggested, identifying what are the actual problems that the software should be addressing. So the financial manager had an amazing spreadsheet, compared it, this was the most cost-effective solution, and that was the end of his involvement. And I wasn't there long enough to see its long-term success, but in the short term, it was an absolute disaster in a way, because there was no adoption. Very good point that Sarah made about the infrastructure. The infrastructure wasn't actually there to support it. So if, you know, especially in smaller companies, the finance manager isn't the person who is then going to proceed with the implementation. So what does work, and I've seen this in a few organizations, small and large, is to find the generalists in the organization and really have them champion the system. For example, this might be the operations manager or the office manager and not the service manager. It can also, when it lands in the wrong hands, because they may be tech savvy or, you know, they have promoted for it at the start, it doesn't mean they're going to be able to champion the system moving forward. So you want to find the generalist, not the specialist in an organization. And then it is a process of really adopting change management principles, sharing the vision. So don't just announce one day, we will now be using HammerTech or Payapps, this is how we're going to do it. Get buy-in from the absolute start, share the bigger picture, and also then lead by example. So going back to that example, the finance manager was still using Excel sheets whilst this platform was going live, and that sends mixed messages. That doesn't work. So the leaders of the organization have to be the first people to use it. As Sarah said, also involve everyone that is affected by this implementation, build a plan around it. So we work in construction, we can plan anything, and we plan everything for a project. Do the same for any changes within an organization, and have everyone give this buy-in of what are the metrics of success? How do we know it's working? So you need to make sure that you can measure the results and also know when is this actually working, because that makes people feel good about it. But as with everything that you do, not everyone is going to love it at first. There is going to be huge resistance. So work closely with the early adopters, because they're what's going to, you know, have the implementation actually take off and be more recognized within an organization, and then work with the later majority. So your early majority people are really going to be the ones who will make this a success, and they're the ones who you're going to empower. You're going to empower those people, which will then have their sphere of influence to make sure that the balance will also come into it. So you give the power to the people, you give it to an individual, not a department.
Yeah. I think also on that point, it might be also important to leverage off your vendor partner, like whether like a HammerTech or a Payapps, whatever software you're implementing, because, you know, more than likely they've been at the coalface of a lot of successful implementations. So your champion that you've got internally, you know, work collaboratively with your vendor partner as part of that change management process to, you know, further enhance the successful implementation and rollout, and maybe get them to play a role, you know, on a broader company level to assist in that change management process.
Absolutely. It's, you know, the person implementing this within one organization, they're not necessarily the expert. They might be keen and ready to go, but lean into the years of experience within the actual companies who are rolling this out for you. That's so necessary.
Yeah. So we just spoke about internal rollout a bit there, but as you know, a lot of construction software relies on a collaboration between many different parties, some of which haven't signed up yet, and yet we are relying on them using the system properly. I suppose the question that comes from that is what do we need? What do we do to panel? What are some of the things that we need to do to get that full end collaboration from everyone internally as part of that rollout?
First of all, it's a great question. First of all, it's really important to understand that 90% of people operate out of a modality of fear. Only 10% are actual visionaries that are able to see the big picture immediately. So if 90% of the people are operating out of fear, they're going to automatically revert to this mindset when any sort of change comes up. So you have to understand that fear-based responses, people are going to immediately shut down. And what are they typically afraid of is becoming irrelevant or becoming redundant, or people won't think that I'm doing my job. They're doing this because of me. Like, they tend to internalize it based on their performance, but it's nothing to do with the inadequacy of their skill set or their job. It actually is not a threat, it's an opportunity, because these systems then free up the individual to actually do their job, which is management, not administration, which is, you know, working with people collaboratively, not pushing paper. So it actually gives people more scope to become better at their jobs. And that's when they can start seeing the vision, and you are then starting to coax them out of their fear mode and into the vision mode. So it's also important when you're doing that to sell it as to how it will specifically aid their position. People are fundamentally selfish. What's in it for me? If I don't know what's in it for me, I'm not going to do it. That's the common discourse that you get. So it's then really about itemizing, well, you know, you won't have to do inductions this way, or you won't have to process payments this way. It'll be done this way. And this is how it will specifically benefit you. But a lot of this resistance also comes around when things happen too quickly. So going back to that plan, you want to work with people so they're not constantly being scared because it's happening too quickly and they can't see forward enough. But as you mentioned before, it is about leaning into their experiences as well. Like, they're on the cold front. They know their pain points better than anyone else. And when people feel that they're not being listened to, it causes frustration and everything. So listening is absolutely key, instead of trying to override what they're feeling, which is not necessarily going to be irrational, but also listening to the logical side, because they're going to help iron out a lot of the resistance and the bumps in the road to make sure that this is a success for the organization internally and the service provider.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it there, and I think there's some great points, especially around that component where you said listen is key. Sometimes as human beings, we don't tend to do that very well or good enough, and especially if we're looking at implementing something that's different to what the business has done previously. That leaning on each other from an expertise and knowledge point of view, and taking a methodical approach to the rollout becomes crucial. So that's great points there. Thanks very much, Elinor. I'm gonna bring Angus into, because I'm keen to talk to Angus now from a customer experience point of view. And guys, while I'm just about to engage with Angus, just a reminder, feel free to ask questions. We're here, the panel's here to answer those as we go along if you find something of interest. Angus, now, if you're anything like me, you might use a piece of enterprise software once in a blue moon and then totally forget what to do, or maybe you guys on the tools aren't that engaged. What are some of the tips that you can share from your experience in terms of implementation, especially on the Payapps fronts, with our audience in terms of how they sharpen the saw, for use of a better term? Can you give us some tips and insights in terms of how that's experienced, or what level of experience and insights for the guys?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nick. So I think this is where, and I'm going to touch on a theme that's been, running throughout this this webinar that Sarah and Elinor have already mentioned. But this is where the buy-in from a few internal champions at your own company is so important. I think, you can have the best software in the world that does all these amazing things for your business, but if you don't have that buy-in from a few people internally, and not just that buy-in, but people who are willing to step up internally and really vouch for a software amongst their colleagues, then if it's just this kind of alien tool, no one's really going to get involved and really embrace using it. And I think that's really come into play when I've gone and done refresher workshops, onboarding sessions for clients. Obviously, I like to think I can demonstrate the benefits of using the Payapps software pretty well and show that to our clients. But it actually, the most significant effect that I've seen in onboarding sessions is when I say something and then someone else in the room from that company will back me up and they'll echo what I've said. And obviously people are going to take much more notice of someone that they work with every day, who they know well, rather than some random guy who comes in from a company, from the software company. It's just the way it is. You trust people that much more than a guy who has come in from the company who sells you the software to try and explain it. So yeah, I think that's just where your colleagues can really help you out there. Whether if you're part of the management team or the decision makers who bought the software and you're going to push that internally, then great. Or if we're going to take the approach as recommended by Elinor and Sarah, that you're going to send a few of the more kind of boots on the ground guys to do that, then yeah, I think that will really help the software stick. I think the other thing is kind of really, really basic and simple, but is often overlooked, is just the help and reference materials that you get from your software provider. Again, some companies that I've worked at, they've potentially been a little bit too eager to just send this 50-page manual that tells you every single tiny little feature of the software. They're really proud of the software that they've produced, but that's not really relevant to your guys who might only really be using it to solve one particular need. And they don't need to know all the technical information, all of the blood, sweat and tears that have gone into making the software. They just want to know, as Elinor just mentioned, really how it can make their life easier. So yeah,
let's be honest, no one's going to read a 50-page manual.
Yeah, so I think, and look, some software providers won't have a one-pager, and I think you're well within your rights to just ask your software partner to provide one for you. It doesn't take very long to put together, a little bit of a one-pager on how to use the basics of a software. I think you're well within your right as a consumer to ask for one if it hasn't been provided to you. Yeah, the only kind of final thing on I guess sharpening the saw, as you put it, Nick, is trying to prevent the saw needing to be sharpened. And by that, I mean just timing the implementation of your software correctly. So I think in my experience, sometimes I've gone into onboard a new client as part of my role. And they've bought software, but they have potentially only been ready to use it another 2-3 months down the line. Now, I think that's where you can work together with your software provider and just time that onboarding session at a time when you know you're going to be good to use the software. Because I get it, as we've mentioned, that you bought a software, you're really excited, so you might want to do that onboarding session straight away as soon as you bought it. But in reality, if you're not going to be using it a month, 6 months down the line, which is often the case, and that's fine, it's just going to lead people to forget, and it's not going to have that momentum in your business.
Good point. You raised a really good point before, Angus, about timing, because we also have the timing of a project is halfway through, it's at its full peak, it's super busy, and then there's a suggestion to implement a new software, and likewise, that is in most cases not the best time to be implementing software either. They're already pushed on their timings, they're pushed on absolutely everything. The willingness to want to implement a new software system is not very high at that point.
On the project I'm working on, when Icon and Cochra merged, they had to be a system merge, and that came around in December, which is also the worst time. So the resistance, the resistance was rife. We got there eventually, but if you had even pushed that out a month later, or even introduced the idea, there would have been a lot less, hands up in the air, this isn't a too hard basket. So
no, I think that's it's very interesting what you say about December in particular. I mean, most of the meetings I went to in December, I could just see people thinking about their Christmas dinner, and I just this is just I'm just gonna have to repeat all of this in the new year when everyone's kilos heavier. So I think that's a great point.
And any training that you do in December, you will need to refresh at the end of January, because brain cells have, disappeared.
January brain cells.
Exactly right. Angus, can I paint a scenario for you? So, you've been using the software for a few months now, and it seems to be working okay. Things are going well. How do we health check and put baselines in place to help us measure the efficiency of the software? Has it delivered on its promises? And if not, how do I make sure it does, because my process isn't collaborated correctly? So that health check premise, let's delve into that a little bit more as part of that ongoing success management plan.
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, one of the most important areas here is just to have really clearly definable yardsticks about how you're going to judge the software. So what I mean by that is, for example, you might say within 3 months of implementing the software, I would like to have the software live on 3 projects and have 10 competent users within my business. So those are clearly defined metrics. And at the end of 3 months, you'll be able to see, do I have it live on 3 projects? And you'll be able to just run a bit of an internal survey of your guys, and see how they feel about using the software. If you've got 10 users who are like that and you're live on 3 projects, you're satisfied that you've fulfilled your own criteria. So the more precise you are with that, the easier it is to measure, obviously, how efficient the software has been for you. Because I think, most people, and it's a point that's been touched on earlier in the webinar, but I think, people have just got this idea when they buy software, they've got a lot of the ideas about what they want it to do, but they don't actually necessarily have ways that boxes they're going to tick along the way. Because it's obviously, there's no software that you're going to buy and then overnight is going to suddenly, improve the efficiency of your business, 1,000%. It's going to be a gradual thing. No matter how good the software, it's all about, getting you guys up to speed. It's not just a tap that you can turn on and off. You've really got to build it up over a matter of months. I just think having those metrics as clearly defined in your own mind. So then, look, obviously, if you come back after 3 months and you're not quite live on 3 projects, it's very easy to ask why not. Whereas if you just say, I want to be happy with the software after 3 months, what does that mean? So, I think just having those metrics really clearly defined is very important. I think also, this is where it's so important that you've got an open dialogue with your onboarding specialist, account manager, whatever you want to call it. I think, the worst thing that you can have is an idea of lots of problems that you want to solve using the software that the software you bought actually isn't designed to solve. because that only creates frustration. So if you've got a very clear dialogue from the beginning with the onboarding specialist from your software company, they'll be able to advise you straight away on areas, you know, that the software is absolutely going to be able to help your business, but also areas that you might have to look at outside of the particular software that you've bought. Because I think, that's certainly been the frustration that I've encountered when I've been to see clients, you know, 3 to 6 months down the line when they've been after implementing Payapps, is they've said, oh, well, part X of my process is still going wrong, but Payapps is actually designed to solve problem Y. You know, and I think, you know, just having an idea of that in your head, not only what you want to achieve, but also exactly what problem you have brought in that software to solve, if that makes sense. And also, you know, if you've got an open dialogue with your account manager, they might be able to advise you of, yes, you know, even if we can't solve that problem now, that's something in our product roadmap that we might be able to solve further down the line. And then you'll know to just, you know, lump it in with that kind of software solution, as it were. Or they'll be able to say, no, this is completely outside of our remit. This is something you guys need to examine internally. And it just removes that frustration.
That communication aspect and relationship with your vendor account manager or implementation specialist or customer success manager, whatever you want to call it, I think is important and very important, especially in that first 3 to 6 months, but equally as important ongoing, you know, for the long term, because there might be scenarios that you will come across which you might not be able to handle internally on your own, and you might need to seek counsel from your account manager, because like we've already discussed and touched on, you know, they've been at the coalface of many of an implementation and ongoing success plan from a software point of view. So I totally agree with that open dialogue and close active relationship between you as, you know, the client, but then with your account manager also.
I think as well, it goes the other way as well, is sometimes, you know, you could be 12 months down the track and you're using the system and you're so used to it doing what you had originally set out for it to do. And there's certain things that, you know, weren't part of that initial conversation, and they keep coming up as pain points for people. And actually the software can provide a solution for it. And so those conversations are equally important from that perspective, as well, as much as, you know, that it is a very open communication. So everyone knows where they stand, everyone knows and understands the expectations of each other, because there's huge benefit in being open and transparent from both perspectives.
Which leads me to a question for you then, Sarah. So what are some of the ways companies stumble when it comes to software rollout? And I suppose what could they have done potentially to avoid that? Because that's also, I think, an important question we need to delve into here too, is what they can do right, but then also what are some of the things potentially that haven't worked as part of implementation and software rollouts that you've done?
Yeah, it's for me, there's probably 2 points in here, and the first one we've all touched on, which is that internal owner. You know, you go onto site, and as I mentioned before, they're being pulled in every single direction. You know, everyone is super busy. They're under, you know, tight time constraints, tight money constraints. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things. And then you as a software provider come onto site and start talking to them about how they should be using a system and they should be using it on a daily basis within their current way of doing things. It's never going to go well, you know, and rightfully so. They, you know, you have no credibility with them. From their perspective, you don't understand what their day-to-day is. Whereas if there's someone internally that understands, you know, what their way of working is, what their daily pressures are, their current, you know, situation, that's just going to go a long way in getting that implementation actually embedded into the projects. So yeah, the number one thing is just identify those people super early on from the very, very, very beginning, and get them involved in absolutely every session. So they're there from the beginning to the very end, huge amount of ownership, huge amount of understanding, And because ultimately, you know, they're going to be the greatest asset throughout this whole process.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. Sorry.
Yep. No, that's no problem at all. I think you've summarized it quite well.
I can keep talking, but yeah, like the other one is as well, you know, we've gone into implementation stage, and we have been faced with a whole new range of people. So, you know, everyone that was in the sales and the demonstration process and the decision-making process was not the people that are in the implementation and therefore ultimately tasked with, you know, rolling this out. So, I mean, these two are quite similar in terms of, you know, there's a common theme here, get people involved early, but, you know, when you go into that implementation phase and it's a new set of people, you are needing to basically resell a system, but resell it to people who have already been told you will be using this. So it's just an uphill battle that, I mean, it doesn't matter how good your system is at that point, they are a little bit disgruntled because they're being forced to use something, but also being forced to be made responsible for the successful implementation of it. So it's just hugely about getting the right people in from very early on and getting them to actually be part of the decision making and feel an ownership for it.
Yeah. On the flip side of what we've just discussed, now I've actually got a question from one of our attendees, and I'll throw this open to the panel for response. So the question that's come through is, what are some possible best tips for implementing a software to a business where the key users are not IT savvy? For example, extra training, how-to guides. As a software vendor, what's the best position to take here? So I'll throw that question open to the panel to respond accordingly. Sarah, Angus, any one of you can go first.
My number one tip is have your phone on you, be available. You know, like there's one thing sending an email, one thing looking up a online user guide, but there's a whole nother thing that when if you're that person that's not tech savvy and is really struggling and you pick up a phone call and can speak to somebody about that, that is going to make a world of difference. You know, that as you know, Elinor touched on, feeling like you are being heard. So, you know, the amount of phone calls that we all get that start with, this is a really stupid question, but, and just being able to be there to answer it will make a massive difference.
Yeah, I think for me as well, it's about breaking down this idea in your head that software is this, you know, very difficult concept and that you need to be an IT specialist to kind of get software. I think, you know, when you're using software, you don't have to be an IT whiz, but I think a lot of people, they hear we're bringing in software and they immediately, you know, alarm bells start ringing. They're thinking this is going to be you need a sort of degree in computer science to be able to use it. And you know, I get asked quite a lot. The classic stereotype question is, are you a computer nerd when I go in? And yeah, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I'm not particularly tech savvy myself. You know, I know how our software works. Let's have a bit of group therapy around that. You know, it's but you know, the ultimate, the theme that, you know, we're going back to here is that your business has brought in software to make your life easier, not to make it harder. So if you just deconstruct this idea in people's heads that, you know, any software is just naturally difficult or complicated, then they'll become a lot more, you know, keen to embrace it. I think just removing that image of, you know, guys sat at computers, you know, only seeing light for an hour a day, it's still quite a stereotype that does still pervade. So what you can do to break that down with your guys and just emphasize that this will make their lives easier, not more complicated, really helpful.
That's very good. Any thoughts from your end, Elinor?
I agree. You definitely need to flip the conversation instead of the IT and the stereotypes and the head trash that comes along with, I have to be an expert in order to use this. We're all starting off as beginners. Everything that you do, we've all started off as beginners at whatever it is, but over time you gain that expertise. But also as a workplace, to actually give people the time and space to properly learn this, it's not an activity that should happen at 5 o'clock when you want to go home and you need to finish bits and pieces and someone's still calling you. Like, that's not giving someone space and opportunity to get the best out of it. So schedule the time, and if you need to help them in other areas of their position whilst they're doing this, or to alleviate something, it's important to actually say, this is important, we're going to support you, here's a time and space to do it. It's not an afterthought, it's a forethought.
Yeah, good point. Another question that's come through here is around how do I convince others that there is a need to invest in software? Now, that's a great question, because it's a great question. And again, I'm going to throw this open to the panel again, but and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, you might have some different thoughts about this, but I still think we're in an industry that is a little bit tech adverse, where there is more and more adoption and openness to adopting tech within building and construction industry as a whole. But there's still that little bit of, oh yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to work for us. And, I'm not sure if the ROI is going to be able to there for us. So share with me your own thoughts around, I suppose, how you get buy-in and how you convince maybe those internally within your business that are not as tech adoptive as what you might want to be.
I'll start. So right now, the business may not need software. That's a very likely scenario. I do agree. Right now, the investment may not be warranted, but you continue to make decisions for where you are right now. How do you actually plan to grow? You need to think about, you need to start making decisions from the future business. Where is the business in 10 years? If it's scaling and if it's growing, can it actually operate without the proper systems and processes and software in order to implement it? Because if it can't, then what do you have to do today? Then it might be, okay, let's start looking at it. Let's start seeing what we need to do to get to where we need to be. Because otherwise you will get left behind, you will stagnate. And if the competition is doing it, they're going to be far more innovative and receiving and achieving the benefits of this a lot sooner. And that is going to put them in a competitive edge. So decisions from the future, and bring that back and think, do I actually have a choice in the matter anymore? And the answer is probably going to be no.
I think, and just on that, Elinor, I think this COVID-19 situation, and I hate referencing it because we're hopefully moving past that now, but I think has allowed a lot of organisations to do a bit of a review of how they approach their processes holistically across their business, and how potentially software can play a role in making life easier from an efficiency point of view, from a process point of view, from an automation point of view. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong if you don't agree, but I think it's been a great time now for an organisation to seriously look at software as a necessity, rather than not sure and don't want anything to do with it. What are your thoughts around that?
I definitely agree. As you were talking, I thought about the example of, we have HammerTech on site, for example, and if we didn't have HammerTech and this COVID situation has come about, there would be way too much face-to-face interaction, way too much handling of paper and pens, and I need to sit down in front of you and actually get someone inducted, whereas HammerTech has alleviated a lot of that. And what that means is the graduates who do the inductions, I don't, been there, done that, but they're now freed up to do other things that's not just, affecting their safety on site because of COVID, but it allows them to do other things. So can we actually do what we need to do without HammerTech and going back to the very manual ways? Absolutely not. And that's just one software that the organization uses.
Angus, Sarah, do you have any thoughts about that?
I guess for me, it's just all about this idea of streamlining your processes. When as you say, at the very least, you're going to be looking at ways to use software to streamline your business at a potentially uncertain time. it's a bit of a no-brainer for me in terms of a time to review. And I think, it's a great time to also maybe just touching back on things, refreshing your users about how to use software. This is a great time to do it. When, as Elinor's just mentioned, all of these remote processes are becoming increasingly more important. I think it's just a good time to take stock, not only of what software you might implement in the future, but to review your systems. And, one thing I've been reaching out to a lot of our clients is just basically offering, video workshop sessions, just refresher sessions, because, it's never become more important to get the most out of software you've already bought. So I think it's I couldn't agree more in terms of a time to review your processes.
Yeah, and it's absolutely like, it does get to a point where there's not really a choice. If you don't take on or adopt new ways of doing things, then you will get left behind and somebody will be ahead of you in the process. And it's a challenge, like, everyone's fighting for business and projects and work. So you've got to be ahead. Yeah,
good point. Another question that's come through, guys, from one of our attendees. How often do panelists come into the business to do periodic health checks on the software success? Good question. Probably Angus and Sarah, maybe a good one for you to answer.
Do you want to go first, Sarah? Or
so we do like probably quarterly sessions with some of our clients. So it's funny, actually, Angus was talking before about, if somebody becomes your advocate in the team and starts answering questions. And it reminded me that, we do some quarterly sessions with the larger clients where it's quite a big room of people. And I remember the first time our customer success manager came back from it and said, one of the people in the room asked a question and somebody else from the same business answered it. And it was to do with the system. And, that fast is like pretty much a high five where we've done it, It's great when you've got your own people and their own people answering the questions on your behalf, you're a success. But we have a customer success team who they are in with their clients probably, speaking sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, but the more, structured is based on the need. If you do have a lot of projects and you do have a lot of work going on and you've got a lot of users, you probably are going to want to see us more. If you only have one or two users of the system and you're trying to manage quite a large workload, we won't be pestering you as much as somebody else, and it's not necessarily down to the size or the use of our system, but we do try to stay out of people's way so they can get on with the work. If they need help, need support, we're always on the end of the phone call, but we will kind of put our more formal meetings to more of a quarterly approach.
I think from my point of view, I kind of try to send new customers a monthly report in terms of just via email. It just tracks a few metrics that we've identified as the key ones to demonstrate how well your business is adopting Payapps. And then, as Sarah's mentioned, I like to use that as a bit of a kind of discussion point with my customers, because if everything's going well and the customer's very happy, they might not want, their guys, an hour, 2 hours out of their day just reaffirming things that they already know. That's kind of pointless for everyone. So conversely, using those figures and what we were talking about earlier in terms of if you're getting getting what you want out of the software, there's probably not that much need for, really regular reviews, more training, more workshops. But on the flip side, if your metrics aren't tracking and aren't delivering what you want, then let's talk and let's get a bit more face to face, particularly in an industry like construction when new projects are kind of popping up all the time and you might suddenly have a massive influx of new users from within the business on a new project. I think it's important to keep a kind of an open mind as much as possible.
And also, you want people using the system, as much as it's business. it's soul destroying, implementing, and then it never being used, or you're in a constant uphill battle and it's not benefiting the company. You know, you want to be at that point where if it's not working, if it's not being adopted, we've tried absolutely everything we can do, well then let's have a conversation about that. It's, you know, not just come on, let's keep plugging along and pushing you. And, you know, if it's not working, then, you know, have the conversation and let's talk about it, get to a point where we're either changing things or, you know, we're going separate ways.
Yeah. So Sarah and Angus, actually further to your responses just there, a question's just come in from one of our attendees. And the question is, do your platforms have reporting tools, e.g. to find out who is and who is not using the platform?
So I'll start. Yeah, we have a lot of, I guess, in-house reporting to see what's being used, who it's being used by, and, you know, because we get a lot of, as I'm sure you guys do as well, but there's the client user and then there's also the contractor user. So there's a lot of benefits from the system where if the contractor is, you know, uploading their swims, completing their inductions, uploading their equipment inspections, that type of thing, it will add huge benefit to the client or the customer. So those are things that we look at, and that's where, you know, our success team would be working with people and saying, you know, 90% of your swims are being uploaded by your own internal people. You know, if you push your contractors to be the ones to upload the swims, that's the point of the system. It's going to take a huge amount of workload. You'll probably get less resistance, you know, and then you'll start seeing the full benefit. So from our perspective, we do have that, but it's an internal thing that we then use to speak with the clients about.
Angus, on the Payapps side.
Yeah, so I mean, within Payapps, from a user experience point of view, you can definitely log in, and we've got a reporting function in Payapps just to see, you know, claims per project, by contract, that sort of thing. So you can identify very easily if there are projects that aren't really, you know, up and running yet. And similar to what Sarah's just been mentioning, we also have that internally where I will look at if there's a particular project that's very low on claim numbers, I'll be able to see that as well. And use that as a discussion point with customers. So yeah, we try and break it down into a little bit of a kind of by project rather than by user, because we find that kind of more productive. If there's a project that's, you know, really not getting off the ground with Payapps at all, then it's easy to ask why. But if there's, you know, some projects that are kind of half going, you know, we try and do it on a project by project basis, because sometimes a project just won't have started yet, and obviously that's fine. Not going to get, you know, too worried about that. But if there's a project that is actually, you know, up and running and should be getting a lot of claims coming through with Payapps, then we can have a discussion. So yeah, and look, bottom line, there are always more that you can be doing with reporting functionality, I think, in software. So I think if from a user perspective, if you're looking at something from a reporting point of view that isn't there, I think definitely feed that back to your account manager or your customer success manager, because yeah, look, reporting is vital to any business. So yeah, I think that would be a tip from me. Thanks,
Angus. Thanks, Sarah. Just got a few minutes left, guys. Just time flies when you're having fun. Elinor, just want to get some final thoughts from you before we formally wrap things up. I suppose, you know, where things are at the moment from an industry point of view, and potentially where you see the industry heading, and some of the challenges that might be coming up in the foreseeable future. Just in general, always keen to get you know, someone who's quite influential within the industry, their thoughts.
Thank you. I think the industry has really done well over the last few months to ride out a very immediate and turbulent time. There will definitely be an uptake in projects, but I think people will be realizing there are better ways to be doing things. What we've been doing isn't necessarily working anymore, because people will be working from home. People have blurred the boundaries between work and life, they're not compartmentalized, and that's all come into a head because of COVID. We've seen that, and businesses can still thrive instead of just survive, as can the individuals. So I would really hope that the lessons learned from COVID haven't been forgotten, and businesses will restructure to some extent and be able to pivot to accommodate for all of this, because this is what people will be looking for if they want to be working in the industry. They've realized it can actually happen. I don't need to go back to exactly how it was. But there will be some really interesting projects coming live, and the organizations want to be the ones front and center tendering and being able to deliver it. So I think it's cyclical and it will pick up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the outlook is pretty positive moving forward, and I think the government's playing an important part in that as part of stimulus packages and fast tracking projects and things that Stephen trying to do for the for the residential market and sector of the business. So I see nothing but as they say, blue skies and rainbows ahead. But I think the learnings from this experience that we've gone through need not be forgotten, and the business as a whole need to continually evolve and review what they're doing to make their processes better, which ultimately will help the business moving forward. So look, that's all we have time for today. So I want to thank everyone for attending. Special thanks to our panelists today, Sarah, Elinor, Angus, for your time and expertise. It's been really enlightening, and I hope each and every one of the attendees got something out of today.